This is a Virginia Museum of Veiled History production, copyright 2017, Social Justice Connections, LLC, written by Larry Lamar Yates. Welcome to the Virginia Museum of Veiled History. Whether you're at the museum, you're connecting to us online, or you're at a presentation by the museum. We have this introduction because we are an unusual museum. The museum has a political and social justice mission, not just an educational one. And the museum is as much about the history of disguising or veiling history as it is about the history itself, as much about what was done to history as what actually happened. And finally, the museum is unusual in being the property and the idea of just one person. Our political and social justice mission is not specific to any political party or candidate. It's a commitment to the political empower of all people, and especially those who in life have painful, oppressive, and powerless positions. And that's a lot of P's. Unfortunately, Virginia is one of the places in the world least friendly to empowerment. For a look at the whole history of Virginia, you can read our book, The Scalawag Scholar's Notes on Virginia. The museum focuses on one key century of that story. The museum is focused on the century that begins with John Brown's attempt at liberation in 1859 and ends with the illness and death of Harry Flood Byrd Sr. 107 years later. We're also focused geographically on the Winchester, Virginia area, where a lot of the drama happened, but also where the drama has been most obscured or veiled. In this period, Winchester was a major center of the conflict around white supremacy, but it was also a major center of the lies that disguised the conflict, the veiling with sentimental beauty of the ugly facts, and the denial and apparent forgetting of the past that has always been central to racism in the United States of America. The museum is being launched with a focus on three true stories that almost no Virginians know and that are in particular hidden from modern Winchester. The first is the story of Emancipation 1863, of the way that one white man's faith in justice strengthened and supported actions for freedom by hundreds of Virginians born into slavery. Few people in Winchester know this story at all, and of the few that do know something about it, most deny the self-emancipation of Black Virginians and pretend that a white man of deep faith who supported them was some kind of strange ogre. The second story the museum focuses on is the story of Virginia's constitutional coup of 1902. Many of us have some vague idea that a Jim Crow constitution existed in Virginia's past. But beyond the excuses of that's the way they were in those days back then, is a story that was outrageous even when it happened. And not just to the Black Virginians who were the original target, but to the half of the white population that was also disenfranchised. And this was done not with some trick or clever parliamentary maneuver, but with a bald-faced open act of theft, a coup that only worked because the elite was unashamedly 100% behind it. You'll learn more from our publications or our video. The third story the museum focuses on is the shameful career of Harry Flood Byrd Sr., a powerful man throughout most of the 20th century Virginia. Don't take our words for the shamefulness of this career. Look at the actions of Byrd's native city of Winchester, which has failed to honor, which hardly acknowledges this illustrious son who died 50 years ago. Why is the most powerful Virginian of the 20th century shunned and not spoken about in his hometown? The museum doesn't believe in erasing history, especially such recent history. We have to learn from the past, good and bad. And the veiling is always part of the story. All of these events and many more have been disguised by stories that comfort a few, insult many, and most importantly, deceive many. In these stories, a few white men have been pure and above reproach as they led Virginia, whether into a war to preserve the slavery business or into a democracy in which only half the citizens could vote. Not only have these few white men supposedly always been right, but the stories they made up about the past have always been true. Stories of a war fought for pure and noble, though vague, reasons. Stories of the delight of the enslaved and their wonderful masters. Stories of the necessity of taking votes away from black men to end corruption. And of course, the story of taking an openly Jim Crow politician and recasting him as a benign conservative. And all these stories, the selling has been paid for by our tax dollars and carried out by our government. So why did I, one person, want to do this? This museum was my idea. I own its building and its facilities. I've been an organizer and a social justice activist for most of my life, and mostly in Virginia. I've been blessed to work with remarkable grassroots people who had no special authority or privilege, who were just humans, who believed they deserved respect and dignity, and who were ready to struggle for justice for their communities and for future generations. And I've seen two great obstacles in the way of these wonderful folks, especially here in Virginia. First, I see the elite that runs Virginia as experienced, slick, well-established, and of course, very wealthy. A lot of Virginians facing that power feel they have to give up self-respect, that they have to humble themselves and beg and buy into the elite version of reality. I know that trusting yourself and others like you and working together works, but many don't trust themselves and buy into the myth of the magical elite. The second problem is that the elite that runs Virginia has too much support that it has gained by fooling some of us. Mostly people who have fallen for a story about race or gender or both. People who believe that a powerful white man is the most reliable friend for a white man who feels powerless. And too often, the stories they've fallen for are exactly the stories that we know at the museum are utter fiction. I know how deep the lies run, how far from the truth these stories are. I know that the con man who lies about the past is not going to be truthful about tomorrow. And I know if we get in the habit of being fooled, another con man always comes along. So I offer this museum. You don't have to believe in everything that I do, even any of it. That's your choice. I'm a 67-year-old widower who inherited some assets from my late wife and from my father. I have no children. So I put some assets aside for myself, but I put a lot into this museum. I did it because I believe in it. I did it because the more I learn about how people operated in Virginia's past, the more I want to change our future. Because I want a bunch of people to at least know what happened here and how it can be different. Because some politicians today, just like in Virginia in 1861 and 1902 and 1959, will lie to us and appeal to a false legacy instead of to fundamental principles that we should all share. I also started this museum because, as a person with a white Southern heritage, I owe people something. I think my ancestors mostly played by the rules, but the rules for my great-great-grandfather included the ability to own other human beings, and he did. The rules even for my father, one of the best people I've ever known, were quite different from the rules that applied to his black neighbors. So just playing by the rules isn't enough. Just knowing that none of what happened back then is my fault now, and I'm very clear on that, is not enough. We have to have better sets of rules. One better set is the moral teachings of Jesus, the teachings that have been so valuable to the descendants of the enslaved and are so often ignored by the rest of us. Can we live by those? I don't know. But I don't know why we can't try. For those of you who strongly disagree, as I said, you don't have to believe in what I say. But if you strongly disagree with what I'm saying and doing, know this. I have a right to tell my truth, and I will defend that right, and I will ask others to defend it. The fact that you may be a white Southerner or a descendant of a soldier of the pro-slavery rebellion gives you no special privileges in my eyes. I have as much claim to that history as you do. I'm willing to spend some time in debating you, responding to you. But my main interest is in connecting to those who think they may have something to learn. If I determine you're not interested in learning, I have every right to ask you to leave my property or step back from my activities. For those who strongly agree, first, I'm not seeking your financial support. I'm going to try to do this without outside support. I'm not looking for advice on a different way to do this, at least until I've been trying this way for a while. But I will be delighted to partner with you or support what you're doing if it's consistent with my mission. I'm going to make a special commitment to support Black History museums and similar efforts. And if we do work together, I won't be telling you what to do. Above all, if you do agree, I hope you will express your agreement in action. The democracy and justice we need will only come about, as our great ancestor Frederick Douglass taught, if we make our demands and then struggle for them. What makes up the museum? The factual and research foundation of the museum is in our publications, each with an extensive bibliography, each based on years of attention and research to that specific area. These publications are 3 cases of veiled Virginia history, how history is veiled, and indoctrinating its young, the story of Virginia. And we have our prior publications, the Scalawag Scholar's Notes on Virginia, and the novel Bloodroot Cantons, and we expect to produce more. Our museum is also made up by its videos, including this one, each 15 to 25 minutes long, that make our ideas more accessible. In addition to this one, there is Slavery in Winchester, Emancipation 1863, Virginia's Constitutional Coup, and Harry Flood Bird Sr.'s Shameful Career, Parts 1 and 2. And there's more to come. What else makes up the museum? Our history background items. At our location at 705 South Loudon Street in Winchester, we have over 300 items on display to illustrate the history we're sharing. They include archival photos, advertisements, poll tax receipts, household objects, a whole wide range of things. Our catalog lists descriptive and historical information on each item. These aren't valuable or rare items, but they have been selected to show the experiences of a wide range of Virginians during the period of racial crisis from 1859 to 1966. In the end, though, what will make the Virginia Museum of Veiled History happen is relationships, connections between people. As we face our crises of race and gender and power, of public lies that the truth finds hard to chase down, we will learn more about how this process works, about how many layers of lies we stand on, but also about the great shoulders we stand on. We will teach each other and strengthen each other, like those anonymous families that came to Winchester seeking freedom in 1863, like those who never lost sight of justice in the long years of Jim Crow. We also may have ugly years ahead, but together our minds, our hearts, and our hands can make them right.